Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining Cyber Skyline Live. I'm Franz Payer with Cyber Skyline, and I'm here to help you learn cybersecurity. We run these episodes for you, so please stick to the end and let us know what topics you want to cover in future episodes. And if you're participating in the National Cyber League, please don't forget that this upcoming Friday, the 22nd, is the start of the individual game. So it starts at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you're on the West Coast, that's 10 a.m. Pacific. So get in, make sure you participate this weekend. The individual game is the whole weekend from Friday afternoon to Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Pacific. Don't miss out. Make sure that you participate and get your scouting report. So this week's topic is what is ICMP? And I'm going to jump straight into my slides. And while I do this and go through today's presentation and today's demo, please ask any questions that you have as we walk through. I'll answer them when we get to breaking points. But without further ado, let's switch to the slides. Okay, so what is ICMP? So ICMP stands for the Internet Control Message Protocol, and it leverages TCP/IP. TCP/IP is one of the common protocols that's used to transmit data over the internet. The other one is UDP, but TCP gives you some reliability so that if a message gets dropped, it'll get resent. And people primarily use ICMP to check for network connectivity and to debug any network issues, trying to figure out if there's an issue with connecting to a device. And the primary use case for this is for using and sending and receiving pings. And you've probably heard of this term before. A ping uses ICMP as the underlying protocol. And the way that it works is that one computer wants to check for connectivity from their device to another device on a network. It could be on the local network. It could be on the internet. If you're working in enterprise, it could be another computer in your enterprise environment. It's just checking to see, do you have a connection from your computer to that computer? And ICMP can be used to identify, is that connection available? And if so, how reliable is that connection, and how long will it take what's your latency? How quickly can you reach that device? The internet, we kind of think of it as this virtual magical thing. In reality, what's happening is that if you're using fiber, it's basically a light signal that is going from one end of a wire to another end of the wire, and that other end of the wire, it might be on the other side of the country, it might be on the other side of the world. That light physically has to travel a distance and come back, and there might be some computers in the way that need to handle that request. And so these things can add latency, and so ping can actually give you an estimate for how much latency there actually is between you and the computer or the device that you're trying to connect to. One important note about pings is that some devices may choose to drop ICMP packets. Maybe they don't want people knowing that they're operational, and they might so they might choose to drop them at the network level, or they might choose to drop them when they actually get to the device. And so just because if you're trying to ping a device that you don't maintain or operate, and you don't know how it's being maintained and operated, it's possible that you might not be able to ping it because they have ICMP disabled. But you may be able to connect to it if there's like an open port, or if you're trying to connect to some application on the device. It's entirely possible that they're just blocking ICMP, but it's still operational. So that's something to keep in mind. However, if you do send a ping and there is a response to your ping request, that definitely means that the machine is operational and there's connectivity there. So just keep in mind that if you can connect using ping and ICMP, you definitely can. There's definitely network connectivity. But if you cannot connect, that does not necessarily mean that there's no internet connectivity between you and that device. It could just mean that they're blocking your request. All right, so let's take a look at what these requests actually look like. If you are not familiar with like what the structure of a packet is, I'd highly recommend you actually go and you look at Wikipedia pages for TCP/IP and for ICMP as well. They'll give you breakdowns on how it works. Basically, the way that I would describe how to look at these packets would be, just imagine that this is a letter, right? And in different parts of the letter, you're supposed to put different bits of information. So standard mail letter, the old snail mail, right? At the very top left, that's where you're supposed to put your return address, your return, the name, your name and your return address. And in the center on the front is where you put your recipient's name and address, right? And so that's your source, where your request came from, is in the top left, and then the destination where you're sending it to is in the center. That's how it works with snail mail. With packets, with network data, there's a lot more information that you can format and stick into your letters. And this is a way, the screenshot I have here is a way of being able to visualize that information. The blue component, or I guess the purple, however you define it, that's the TCP component. That's all the information from TCP. Remember, I mentioned that ICMP uses TCP. And so when we send this letter, when we send our packet over the internet, this TCP information is necessary to ensure delivery of our message. And then the bottom portion, this red portion, is the ICMP information. That's the actual substance of what we're sending with the ICMP protocol. Briefly, with the TCP section, you can see certain information that is blocked out. And so you can see the header information for TCP is 20 bytes long. And we have information like the version of TCP IP. We have information about the length, time to live, the protocol, some checksums. Checksums are used to verify. They basically verify whether the message has been accidentally modified in some manner or tampered with. And then there's a source and a destination IP address. All of that information is necessary to actually ensure delivery of your message. The bottom part in the red is specifically information that we need for ICMP. And you can see that there's an ICMP header. It's 8 bytes. There's the first byte is being used for the type of message. The second byte is being used for a code. The third and fourth byte, that's being used for a checksum. And then the next 4 bytes is the header data. And these 4 fields collectively form the header, which is 8 bytes long. That's 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 4, right? So that's 8. That's kind of like, basically, those are the only values that we care about today. Those are the values that we will see in our demonstration today when we actually run the ping command. There's also the ICMP payload. This can contain additional optional data. It will be used by the ping program today. This can give you some additional information with like with about like network time, what time the device has and stuff like that. It can also be used to insert arbitrary data for your own use case. But that is not our concern today. We're only concerned about the ICMP header. And what I've actually done is below here, I've shown how this header breaks down even further. And so the very first byte in the header is listed as type of message. And this refers to, for our purposes today, whether or not the ICMP packet is a request or a reply. And so on the previous slide here, when we are sending an ICMP ping, what is happening is one computer is sending a request to another computer, and it says, hey, please respond to me and let me know that you're available. And then that computer will then subsequently send a reply back. And when the first computer receives that reply back, that's when it knows, okay, I can reach that other computer. It'll also get some additional information like how long did it take for my request to get there and come back. There's also in the second byte this code. Now, I don't know what this was intended for, but code is always set to 0, so we can kind of ignore that. And then the next 2 bytes are the checksum. I mentioned before checksums, basically, to simplify it, there is a math function which will take the contents of the data here and convert it into a number that is 2 bytes long. And if any of the data gets modified, then that checksum will be different. And when the recipient gets the message, if the recipient attempts to use that math equation to get a checksum again, and their checksum value does not match the checksum value that they received, that means that there's a mismatch, which means that the data has been tampered with. That data tampering could be a computer in between the two devices actually messing with the contents of the data. It could be a solar flare messes with the data somehow. Just some random stuff happens and the data is changed in some way. The checksum is the way for the recipient to verify that the message is in the same, it has the same contents as was intended by the sender. So when the sender sends the message, the checksum is written so that the recipient can verify the checksum and make sure that the data is consistent. And then following the checksum, we have this header data. The header data is split into two components. There is the identifier and the sequence number. The identifier is going to be a unique value that is the same for all of the pings sent in a single command. And so when you run the ping program, your computer will send multiple requests and it will expect multiple replies. And so it's going to send the sequence of pings, and each one of those pings with the same ping command will have the same value for the identifier. That way we can identify which ping packet corresponds to the actual command that we typed. And then there's a sequence number here. The sequence number increments, I believe, typically from 0 all the way up, and then it'll loop back when it gets to its maximum value. But like I said, we're sending a sequence of pings, and so every time we send a ping request, we're going to increment the sequence number by 1, so that again we can identify when the reply comes back which ICMP packet corresponds to which ping request we sent. And this will make a little bit more sense when we go through the demo today. To actually go about using ICMP and sending pings, we're going to use the ping command. So very easy to remember. You use the ping program to send ping requests. And by default, you just simply type in ping and then the IP address of the device that you want to ping. In this case, the example we're using 8.8.8.8. If you don't already know this, 8.8.8.8 is a DNS server that Google operates for free. And so a lot of people use this as kind of like a reliable IP address that you can ping to see if you have internet connectivity, because Google makes this server available to everyone on the internet. And so if you have difficulty pinging this IP address, it typically means that you've got an issue with your internet, because we're assuming that Google is not going to disable pings, and we're going to assume reliably that Google is going to make sure that this is available. So that's why we're using this as our example. I specifically wrote in here that this is the ping command for Kali. The behavior of the ping command differs depending on your operating system. And so if you run this ping command on Windows, I believe Windows defaults to only sending 4 ping requests before it stops. On Kali, it will send an infinite number of ping requests until you tell it to stop sending ping requests. So that's the default behavior. Now, if you wanted to mimic the behavior of Windows, you can use the -C option and specify how many ping requests you want to send. In this example here, we're doing ping.c 10 and then 8.8.8.8, which means that we're going to limit our ping requests to just 10. So we'll send those 10 requests and then we'll stop. We'll be done. In this third example here, I'm showing you how you can choose the amount of time that your computer will wait between sending ping requests. So if I do ping-I and then 5. This will tell, then the IP address 8.8.8.8, this will tell the ping program to wait 5 seconds between each ping request. And so you can combine this with the second option, with the -C option, where you could say ping -I5 space -C space 10, and then the IP address, and then that will send 10 ping requests and wait 5 seconds between each ping request, which means it'll take you, what, 45 seconds to send all those pings. The first one sends right away, and then each subsequent one will wait 5 seconds between them. So you can control exactly how fast you're sending these requests. And then the last option here that I'm showing is the -T option, which sets the TTL. In this case, I'm setting it to 64. Now the TTL stands for time to live. And time to live specifically helps us make sure that our data on the internet doesn't keep going forever. So let's cover quickly how the internet works. Basically, when you want to send data from my computer to Google, you have to go through a series of different devices who are faithfully transmitting your data and trying to get it to where you want it to go. When the data leaves your computer, it will likely go to if you're at home, it'll go to your home router. So let's just say I have a Wi-Fi router. I'm connected to my router via Wi-Fi. I send my data to my Wi-Fi router, and then I need to, my Wi-Fi router then needs to send that data outside of my home network. And that will go through my ISP, my internet service provider. I'm using Verizon. And so my data goes from my computer to my router to one of Verizon's servers, whichever one of Verizon's routers, whichever is hooked up to my apartment building. And then Verizon's routers will probably send that data between another, 5, 10, 20 other routers. And eventually it will get to Google servers. Now, the whole system is built upon trust. It's also built upon kind of an assumption that every single time the data transfers between one device to the next device, you're getting closer to your final destination. Sometimes things go wrong. All of these devices on the internet, they have a big table. It's called a routing table, which will dictate where to send the data when they receive it. It's a giant table that says, okay, if you're getting a packet that is going to be sent to any one of these blocks of IP addresses, send it to this person. If you're going to get, if you have a packet that's going to these different destinations, send it to this different device. And so each one of these devices is trying to send and pass along your data. It's a big game of telephone. Sometimes it goes wrong. Sometimes your data goes into the wrong direction. It doesn't actually end up getting closer to your final destination. And in theory, it's technically possible, without anything preventing it, for data to just get passed and forth between different devices in an infinite loop and to just clog up the network, because it's taking up bandwidth and it's preventing other traffic from getting through. And so this is where the TTL comes in. The TTL is the time to live, and it basically specifies how many different devices should this packet pass through before we give up on it and we say, that's it, it's not going to make it, try again, or don't try again, but we're not going to keep attempting to send this message anymore. And the way that it works is that every single time your data goes between two different devices, the TTL gets decreased by 1. And so it might start off at, in this case, it starts off at 128. And then when it goes to the next computer, it goes down by 1. So for between me and my router, it will go down by 1. Now it's 127. And then it goes from my router to the router that I'm connected to within Verizon. And then now it's 126. And then maybe it decrements by 5 or 10 more. And then it gets to Google. If for whatever reason, it takes more than 128 devices passing it back and forth my message to get to Google, it will actually technically never get there. It'll get dropped before before it reaches its destination. So TTL is very important, and it helps you identify how close you are to a device, in terms of like how many actual devices are between you and your final destination. And then the final thing that we're seeing here is time. So this is what we call the RTT, the round trip time. But basically, this is the amount of time that it takes for your message to get from you to your destination and back, round trip, right? Because we sent our ping request to 8.8.8.8, and then 8.8.8.8 sent us a reply back. So by the time we hear back from our initial request, the time elapsed to get to our destination and the time elapsed to get back from our destination to us, that is the time that we're seeing listed in ping here. Now, there's one thing that I couldn't figure out, why it's the case, but you can see my screenshot here, TTL is set to 128. That was the default going out. For whatever reason, my response back showed the same TTL, and when I ran this in Windows, it actually went down, but I ran it in Kali, it didn't go down. I don't know if like I'm running something wrong, or if there's some sort of setting or some bug in the Kali version of ping. But if any one of you has an idea what it is in the comments, please let us know. Because I've been scratching my head about this for about 20 minutes. But normally that TTL value, by the time you get the response back, it should be a different number than the default, because there have been different devices in between you and your destination which have been decrementing that TTL value. But right now I'm going to switch over, and we're going to actually play around with ping, and we're going to look at what the data looks like in a packet capture. So let's switch over to a demo. And if any of you will have any questions while we do this switch, please ask them now, and I'll be sure to answer them. Okay, so we are here now with our trusty Kali Linux, and we're going to be trying to do the same exact examples that I showed in the slides. And the first thing that I want to show is, let's just do a simple ping of 8.8.8.8 and see what we get back. And let's try to understand what's happening here. So right now, because I did not specify any other options, I just used the default. Kali Linux here, the implementation of ping will consistently, it'll just keep sending these pings, right? Ping number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're currently on 22. I think this is sending about 1 a second. I think that looks like the default behavior. And what you can see is that the time varies. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. This one took 10.7 milliseconds. This one took 3.92 milliseconds. That's quite fast. And like, this is going to keep going forever until I tell it to stop. So I'm going to tell it to stop. And the way that you do that in Linux is you do Control-C. That's the keyboard combination that will send basically a stop command to the program. And when we told the program to stop, we can see some of our summary stats. So we can see here 52 packets transmitted. So that means that we sent 52 ping requests to this IP address, to 8.8.8.8, and then we got 52 replies back, which means that all of our data made it back. Generally, because we sent 52 packets, this means that our connection was relatively stable. Now, I'm sending this over a wired connection. If you send this via a wireless connection, these results can be a lot more drastically different. You might be losing more packets. Your times might be longer. They might vary a little bit more. if a fun fact, microwaves, if you actually turn on a microwave, that will disrupt your Wi-Fi signal. And so if you're in the middle of doing some pings and someone turns on a microwave and you're close enough, you could have a lot of dropped packets until the microwave stops. There's a lot of things that can mess with this. And so that's why there's some variation here. Like I said as well, there are multiple different computers that are passing along your message in a big game of telephone. And so if one of those computers gets a little bit more busy and it takes a little bit longer to forward your message, that might cause the time to increase. And so you can see all these variations. But generally, this is a pretty quick time to get a response back. And then in the stats here, you can see the min, the average, the max, and the deviation typically with your data. So the fastest we were able to get a round trip time is 3.6 milliseconds. That's very, very fast. So 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So this is, I don't even know how to put this in context, right? So like 1/10 of a second is 100 milliseconds. And so this is 30 times faster than 1/10 of a second. So it's very fast. You have the average here, which is seven and some milliseconds. And then the maximum time is this 28.6 milliseconds. So this is a pretty fast connection, and you can see 0 packets lost. So this is what the summary looks like with a standard ping. Now let's try actually setting a limit so that we only send, let's just say 10 ping requests. So I'm doing ping-c 10 and then 8.8.8.8. And you can see here that we only sent 10 requests, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here are all of our stats. And this is our summary, just like before. So this is looking exactly the same. The only difference is that the first one with the defaults here would run forever until I canceled it. And then this time when I ran it with the -C10 option, this specifically says, hey, send 10 requests and then stop. And that's exactly what happened here. Now, let's actually try to increase the amount of time between these requests. By default, it looks like it's doing about 1 second apart. You can see here that when we sent our 10 requests, the total time taken was 9 seconds. 9,000 milliseconds is about 9 seconds. And so that's about 1 second apart. So if we say, okay, we're going to send the same 10 again, but I want to wait 3 seconds between each request, that means that this should take us about 27 seconds to run. And so I'm going to let that run. And we got a question here coming in. What if the microwave is quite a ways away? What if the computer is quite a ways away from the microwave? It depends on a multitude of factors. Not only depends on how close your computer is to the microwave, but also how close is your Wi-Fi router to the microwave. And additionally, how strong of a microwave do you have, and how well does your actual microwave, how well does it contain itself within the confines of the microwave? How much is it leaking in terms of the interference? So generally, I'd say that, like, you know, if you're within probably, and I'm just like randomly guessing, like if you're in the same room with the microwave, there's a good chance that it messes with you. If you are like 100 feet away, you're probably fine. But it's both the computer with the Wi-Fi connection and the router that need to be, the Wi-Fi router that need to be away from the microwave. And by the way, like that's how signal jamming works. Like microwaves, they're not intentionally trying to jam signals, but the thing is that when they actually operate, they emit, like, quite literally microwaves, which happen to be around the same wavelength as the Wi-Fi bandwidth. And so the Wi-Fi, I'm blanking on the wavelength. So let me, I can actually probably pull an example. Um, so microwave length. I need to do microwave wavelength. This is a slight detour. All right, so this is what I'm looking for, the electromagnetic spectrum here. So we've got microwaves here at this frequency, and then let's get Wi-Fi wavelength. So Wi-Fi operates on the 2.4 gigahertz, in the 2.4 gigahertz region, and microwaves are at they're in the 1 gigahertz range, right? And so you can see how they might spill over a little bit into the 2 gigahertz range. So that's a fun fact. All right. Back to pings. So you can see here that when we specified the -C10 and the -I3 option, we sent 10 packets about 3 seconds apart. It took us about 27 seconds. And here are our stats once again. And now I'm going to try something different. Now, because I mentioned that I'm not sure why this TTL here is not changing. We are going to try to figure out how many devices are between my computer and 8.8.8.8. That's Google, right? How many computers are between me and Google? The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to mess with the TTL value until we stop getting responses back. Because if the TTL value is too small, then it will get ignored, it'll get dropped before it makes it to the destination. And so we should be able to guesstimate, or not guesstimate, we should be able to find out exactly how many devices are between me and Google, specifically this IP address 8.8.8.8, and with exact certainty. Now, the one caveat there is that the internet is constantly shifting around. So at what moment it might be exactly 10 devices, and the next moment maybe another computer gets added in between me and Google, and now it's 11. Maybe a faster route is created and now it's 9. So that value is only valid at that moment in time, and it could change in the future. But for the purposes of our experiment today, I think it's pretty realistic that it'll stay the same in the very short duration in which we're doing this experiment. So I'm going to do ping, and I'm going to do -T. -T is specifying what the TTL should be. And I'm going to start by saying 64. So I'm saying that the upper limit for how many devices I want between me and Google is going to be 64. And I put in the IP address here, 8.8.8.8. And I run this, and I can see I'm getting replies back, which means that there are fewer than 64 devices between me and Google. So let's cut this in half, and let's see 32. Okay, 32 is still working. So that means that there are fewer than 32 devices between me and Google. Let's just cut this down to half again. Let's go to 16. 16 still works. So there are fewer than 16 devices between me and Google. How about 8? All right, so you can see here when I did 8, I'm no longer getting any replies back. If I look at my stats here, you can see 7 packets transmitted, 0 received, 100% packet loss, which means all of those ping requests that we sent out, they all did not reach the destination. And so we need to increase this a little bit. Let me increase it by 2. Let's just try 10. Does 10 work? 10 works. Okay. So let's try 9. And 9 works. So at this moment in time, there are nine hops, 9 devices is enough to get from where we are to our destination at Google 8.8.8.8. So that's a fun little experiment that you can do. You can try this out on Kali Linux yourself. See how many different, how many hops are required to get all the way between where you are and Google. This value might vary for you. You might be closer to a Google server or further away from the Google server than I am. But I always find that to be an interesting and fun thing to do as well. And someone's posting in the chat, there's a more efficient way of doing this. It's called traceroute. And that's true. Traceroute is, it automates the process of doing this for you a little bit. And so I definitely recommend you trying that out. But I think trying it out directly yourself using Ping is like a fun way to be able to understand exactly how this works. You're lowering the limit that you'll allow for how many hops between you and your destination. Okay, so let's take a look at what this packet capture looks like. I'm going to open up Wireshark and we are going to do a capture. So this is Wireshark. Wireshark will record all of the traffic that is being sent through my wireless, through my network adapter. And so I'm going to choose this button. This is the button that will let me, oh, actually, I think I might need to run this as root. So let me do sudo Wireshark. Cool, it looks very different now. I'm gonna click that button again. So to cover what just happened here, you need to run as root in order to create a packet capture, in order to record the traffic on your wireless network adapter. But you do not need root permissions to view a capture that has already been taken. Because we are going to create a capture, we're going to be recording the data, we need to run this as root. So I can see here my, my network interface ETH0. I'm going to select that. I'm going to hit start. And this is going to record all of our network traffic. And so I will now come here and I will run another ping. And so let's run my ping here. And I'm going to set my TTL to 10. And immediately we are seeing all of these ICMP packets. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to specifically limit this to just looking at ICMP traffic. There was some other traffic getting in there as well. That's a little bit distracting. And let's look at what the packet capture is telling us. So the very first packet in here, you can see source 192.168.88.128. Now, this is my IP address in my virtual machine. And then my destination here, 8.8.8.8, that is Google. And if we go and we expand the Internet Control Message Protocol section here, you can see that this is type 8. I don't know if you all remember from the slides, but the two types that we were interested in was type 8 for a request and type 0, I believe, for a response. And so you can see here, type 8. And then code we said was always 0. This checksum is just a number that is being generated to verify that the data has not been messed with. And you can see here Wireshark is actually being verifying that for us, and it's saying that this is correct, that the data actually does match to this checksum. And then we have the identifier here, and it's specified in 2 formats. If you were with us last episode, we talked about the difference between big endian and little endian format. So big endian means that you read the value from left to right, and little endian means that you read the value from right to left. And Wireshark is giving us the identifier in both big endian, that's this BE value, and little endian notation. And so I believe we are interested in the big endian value, but this is just a kind of a random number, so it doesn't matter too much for us. But we will notice that this value, the identifier, will be consistent across all of the packets that we sent because we ran one ping command. So we want all of these ping packets should correspond to that ping command with this same identifier. If we sent a different ping command, and I'll show that later this episode, we will get a different identifier. And then we have the sequence number. Now I mentioned this is going to go from 1 and then it'll keep counting up, up and up and up and up until it loops back around. Again, we get it in big endian and little endian notation. And this, I definitely know this is in big endian notation. So we start with 1 and then the next one should be 2. This might be a little bit small to see, but I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to go to the second request. And you can see in the second request, it says sequence number 2. If I go to the third request, it says sequence number 3, 4, 5, and so forth. But I'm going to just stick with the first packet for right now. But you can also see here that the identifier, this identifier, is the same the entire time as well. Okay, so we verified that this is type 8, meaning ping request. Code is always 0. Checksum is going to be determined for every single packet. The identifier here, the sequence number here, and this is the data. This is not relevant for us today, but if you recall back to the slides, this was a section that we highlighted in the packet format. Now, where did that TTL go? Because we made a TTL of 10. So we should be able to see the TTL, right? Let's take a look here and see if we can identify that. The TTL is specifically listed in the TCP section of the packet. And so right now what we're looking at there's 4 sections to this packet. There's the frame, there's the Ethernet section, there is the TCP IP section, and then there's the Icmp section. So we need to go to the TCP IP section because this is where we find the TTL. And you can see here under TTL, time to live, 10. So we can definitely see that the ping command was actually respecting this and setting the TTL to 10. And when this packet goes out, that number is decrementing. Now let's take a look at the reply. We covered all the fields in the request. We want to look at the echo reply. So if we look at the echo reply, you can see here that in the Icmp section, and let me just get rid of this section for right now. In the Icmp section, we have the type, which is 0. That is the type for the ping reply. Code is always 0. Here's the checksum. It's correct. The identifier is the same. 0xEA2C. If I go back to the previous one, 0xEA2C. The sequence number is also 1. So this reply corresponds to the previous packet, which was the request. So we sent request number 1, we get reply number 1. If we move on to the next packet, we get request type 8, sequence number 2. So this is the request for ping number 2, and then following this, we should get the reply for request number 2. And so you can see here in this next packet, we have type 0, which is ping reply, and then we have the sequence number 2. So if we go to the next one, that should be the request for number 3. Type 8 indicates the request, the sequence number is 3, then the next one should be the reply for 3. Type 0 is the reply, the sequence number is 3. So if we keep going through this, what we'll notice is that these numbers keep incrementing. Okay. Something else that I noticed is that with these replies, the TTL that we have is 128 in the reply. So it could be that when Google is sending us a response back, the TTL is getting set to 128 by the time it gets back to us. I'm not entirely sure why that might be the case. If there are actually 10 packets, 10 hops between us and 8.8.8, it could be that they set their TTL to 138. It seems like a weird TTL to set because it's not a power of 2, but it's entirely possible that that might have occurred, or for whatever reason. And actually, this might be more plausible. I think the issue might actually be because I'm using VMware, and VMware is resetting the TTL when it gets the packet. That's also another possibility, but I'm not entirely sure about this. I just know about that when it gets to me, the TTL is set to 128. I might actually be able to. I'll show an example here. I'm running this from my Windows machine. I'll switch my window really quickly so you can see what happens when the TTL actually gets reduced. So here I am with my Windows command prompt, and if I ping 8.8.8.8.8, you can see here that the TTL, I think the default TTL here is 128. And by the time it gets to me, the TTL has been reduced to 119, which means that there were 8 hops between Google and myself. To get back, it took 8 hops. Sorry, 9 hops, right? 9 plus 119 would get you 128. All right. So back to running ping on Kali. And so just to recap what just happened there, I noticed that the TTL here on my Kali machine is set to 128. I believe the reason why it is 128, which is like the default value, is because I'm running this machine through VMware, and VMware is needing to basically play the telephone game with my data between my Windows host machine and my Kali virtual machine. And when it's playing that game of telephone, it's resetting the TTL value to 128. And that might also explain why it takes one additional hop in Kali than it does for my host machine, because transmitting the data between my host and my virtual machine would require one additional hop. And so without the virtual machine, I can connect to Google in 9 hops, but with the virtual machine, I need 10 hops because of that one additional hop transferring the data between my host and my virtual machine. If that went over your heads, you can ignore that. But if you understand how virtual machines, need to communicate with the host machine, that's the explanation for why the TTL is set to 128 when I have it in my virtual machine. So we ran back to running ping. We ran ping the first time with -T10. I'm going to do now a -I3-T5. And what I want to show here is that the sequence number should reset back to 1 when we look at this in the packet capture, and the identifier should be a different value than what we saw when we ran the previous command. So I'm going to run this now. We're going to switch back to Wireshark. And you can see here that we are starting to get some new ping requests. And maybe I made this too slow. It looks like none of the data is coming back. Oh, I didn't set the count to 5. I set the TTL to 5. So let's set the count to 5. Okay, now we're actually getting data back. All right, so we sent all of the data there. I can see that. So when I ran that command with TTL5, TTL5 was not enough to actually get a response back from Google. And so that's why we have all of these ping requests. You can see all these ping requests here with no corresponding replies because we sent the data out, but the TTL was too small to actually make it to Google, and so Google never got the data, and Google never then, as a result, Google never sent a reply back. So the first request immediately before the reply is probably the most likely place where I'd see the one that worked here. And if we compare this ping request to the first ping request that we've ever had in the packet capture, you should notice that the identifier should be different. So this ping request here, when we ran the command for the third time, has an identifier of OX164C. If we go to the very first packet, it has an identifier of OXEA2C. So it's a different number. That is how the ping program can match up the replies to your command. If you had multiple pings running at the same time, it'll actually be able to figure out which replies correspond to which commands. And then you can see the sequence number also reset back down to 1. And so it's back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. So this is how ping works. You are sending data to a server or to some other computer. That computer is replying back to you if they're supporting ICMP and they're actually responding to your pings. You can use TTL to figure out how many devices are between you and your destination. And you can also use ping to figure out how long does it take to send data to the server or to the computer and back, right? To my intended destination and back. What's the actual time in milliseconds? And then we also looked at the packets, right? We're actually able to see from the specification, the protocol. If I go back to ICMP Wikipedia, you can follow along at home and pull up this table. I used the exact same table that they had over here. This is not the right one. Let's try this one. All right. So on the Wikipedia page, they said type 0 is the echo reply, type 8 is the echo request. There's a lot more information that you can gain from Googling around, but we were able to confirm from their specification for how ICMP works that is indeed the information that we're seeing when we look at the packet capture. So that will conclude the demo for today. I will stick around and answer any additional questions that we have. But in the meantime, I'm going to request that you all let me know, what new topics you want us to cover in the future. If you have any final questions, let me know right now. I'm also going to put up the button to sign up for next week's webinar. We're going to be covering how DNS works. And then the week after that, we're going to be covering how to actually use Metasploit to exploit a VS FTPD server. So how do we actually use Metasploit? We get to be the cool hacker, break into a server and get a command line on a server using a real exploit. So that'll be a fun one on November 4th. But next week's episode is how DNS works. That'll be October 28th, same time, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. All right. Jonathan's asking, is fping something that might be covered here? I can cover it really quick. Fping it uses ICMP, but fping is much simpler. It just gives you like a quick indication of whether or not the host is alive. I believe you can also put like multiple different hosts. So let me do like 8.8.8.8. I'll also do 1.1.1.1. And it'll let you check to see if multiple hosts are alive. Behind the scenes, it's using ICMP. It's a little bit faster, but it only tells you whether or not the host is available. Michael's asking, can you show us traceroute 8.8.8.8 on your Kali machine? I only saw a bunch of stars. I believe this will do the same for me as well. So traceroute, what traceroute does is it uses ICMP to figure out all of the different devices between you and the destination. But I believe that like there's a lot of things that can cause it to not work. And to be honest, I haven't gotten traceroute to actually work for myself um, in like years. Um, Let me see. You can try traceroute with dash I as well. Uh, let's run this with root. Yeah, that didn't provide too much help. I think there might be some protections that devices are putting in place to prevent you from doing traceroute. But if anyone else in the audience has any suggestions for how to get traceroute to work, we'd love to hear them as well. All right. So thank you all for joining us again today. We did today's episode on a Tuesday because we got individual game coming up on Friday, and it's not really a good good idea to do a webinar right before the launch. We just want to make sure everything's working before the launch of the new game. So we'll be back to our regular schedule of doing the webinar on Thursday for next week, and I believe we'll be back on the. We're going to be back on November 4th. That'll actually be a Thursday. We're keeping up with the Thursday for the VS FTPD exploit episode. I think that'll be a fun one. I think a lot of people will like learning how to use Metasploit. So make sure to tune in to next week's episode and the week after that. And thank you all again for joining us today. Make sure to participate in the individual game if you're signed up for NCL, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, everyone. Take care.